Good morning and welcome to Retirement Tax Matters. I'm Adam Reed. This is Garrett Crawford, our resident CFP. How are we doing this morning?
Doing pretty good, Adam.
Yeah, not too bad. I think we alluded to it maybe last episode, but RMD season, it's like, I think Monday is going to be, we've kind of been doing some prep work and it is upon us.
Yeah, I was thinking today, we don't just do podcasts every week. We're not influencers in that way. We're actually working with clients all the time. And October really, it's one of our busiest seasons here around the office. You can only imagine how many tax returns we're looking at, Roth conversions. We have new people that are coming on board as clients, and then existing clients that have new, life issues. And October is pretty crazy, and so we're kind of running on fumes. But here we are again this week, bringing the education to the people.
We're here. We're doing it. Yeah, it's always funny. I think every industry has its ebbs and flows, but it seems like for us, we hammer home intra-year tax projections, and so you don't want to do that too early in the year because, as we know, life changes. Financial planning is a moving target, so we like to wait till later in the year. But also, I like to think our clients love us, but a lot of them by holiday times are like, "Hey, I don't want to see you guys. I want to have all this taken care of so I can enjoy Thanksgiving and Christmas with the family and kind of coast off into the new year." So.
Yeah, I agree, and it's actually one of my favorite things about this industry is that they don't want to come in on holidays. But I will say I have a couple years in years past where I remember thinking about Roth conversions and are we going to get it in before the December 31st deadline? So if you're out there, try not to wait until December 31st. Before Christmas is ideal.
Kind of like your CPA is like, do not show up on April 14th with tax documents. Please get it in earlier.
Yep.
So we're in a similar boat. So, well, yeah, I think it's funny. RMDs maybe it's not a perfect segue, but kind of reminds me. I was talking to a client yesterday who's like, "Hey, I want to process my RMD. What do I do with it?" And you got options, right? You can reinvest it. You can put it in cash, and I think that kind of leads us into our topic for today of this kind of dilemma of, or maybe just the thought process for clients or people listening to this that are trying to decide how much cash reserve do I need? Do I need to spread these things out in a lot of different places? What about a brokerage account? I know I have my IRA, my Roth, but I've heard of these other accounts that are set up a little bit differently. And so it's interesting too. I found in my time in the industry, people think there's a million different options out there, but really when you boil it down, maybe there's different buckets inside of these. But you've got your bank, your cash, your savings, checking. You've got an IRA, a Roth IRA, and a brokerage account. And maybe there's some other places outside of this, some annuities, some insurance products, but in a lot of ways, those are kind of the places you've got. And so helping people navigate, where do I put my money? And then also getting used to, hey, now the money is what I'm living off of. It's not just something I'm saving away, but now it's something I'm living off of. So how can they feel comfortable with a good mix of cash versus investments and some of those things? So I think we're going to tackle that today.
Yeah, and there's a lot to say about this subject of what do I do with my cash? And, it's funny, I say cash, and I remember one time I asked somebody, and I said, so how much cash do you have on hand? And they were like bills? Like coins? And I said, no. When I'm about to say how much cash, it's really like money that's sitting in your bank. Maybe it is some cash in a safe or something, but really like money that's not earning a lot of interest. But the big benefit of cash is that you can go get it as soon as you need it. Right. And so maybe a helpful definition as we talk about like the cash dilemma, it's that money that's really not doing much for you interest-wise, but it has a great role in your finances in that you need to have cash on hand that if the air conditioner breaks, if the roof needs to be repaired, if your car needs a new engine or transmission, that you don't have to worry about, calling your financial planner or selling securities out of your investment account so that you can just go ahead and get that taken care of and move on with your life. But let's back up just a little bit because I always say rules of thumbs are great in financial planning, but they apply to no one in particular. And one of those is you've probably heard it your whole life, and I know Dave Ramsey is big on this, but having like 3 to 6 months worth of expenses in a checking account. And when we talk about that rule of thumb, I think maybe the first helpful clarification is that that 3 to 6 month number probably doesn't include your membership to the local luxury gym. It probably doesn't include the superfluous subscriptions, YouTube Premium 4K edition, NFL Red Zone. When we talk about,
it doesn't cover my steak dinner every night and
yeah,
going out and a bottle of wine and all that.
Probably not. And I remember back in 2020 when COVID hit, people were asking, like, how much money should I have, in my checking account? And really, that 3 to 6 months, it would be like a number for expenses of like things you got to do to live and to get through those 3 to 6 months. So it's probably a mortgage, it's probably groceries, it's probably insurance premiums, it's things like that you can't go without. And so you might find that, if you have a very high monthly expense level, that you might not need that times 6, but what you do need is some level of fixed expenses in the bank that would get you through 3 to 6 months. And so I think that's good and true for a lot of people, but I would challenge the retiree, the person that is listening to this podcast, and I'm sure we're going to go in a couple different directions here, but this whole idea of an emergency account, I think applies much better when you're working and you're earning money. I don't think it's as perfect of a fit once you retire. I still think there's a place. I'm not trying to say something heretical here this morning. I think there's still a place for an emergency fund, but when you stop working or when you do not have the ability to work anymore, all your savings is your emergency fund. If you don't have the ability to earn more money, everything you have is your emergency account. And so I think we can sometimes get lost, especially after retirement, trying to figure out, okay, I need 6 months worth of my money in cash in an emergency account because somebody told me to do that once. And I would probably argue, your IRAs, your Roth IRAs, your investment accounts, all of that is like one type of money, and we've got to think of it together. Now, that doesn't mean we can't keep 6 months in a checking account or a savings account, but I think the trap that I fall into, Adam, or that I see a lot of our clients fall into, is lots of accounts. And so they might have a checking account at their bank. They might have multiple checking accounts because they do different savings things for different purchases, and I get that. And then they'll have a savings account where they've got a couple more months worth of expenses. And then, they opened up a credit card or another bank account at a separate bank to get some type of reward or maybe a mortgage or something. So they've got a checking and a savings account at that second bank. And I just see it very common that people have a couple different banks that they're using, and then sometimes it even hits like a third bank, and that's because maybe they're running a business and they've heard FDIC insurance, and it's up to $250,000 per person, and so they've got so much cash they're at multiple banks taking advantage of that FDIC insurance, and I see where more accounts can add more complexity than's necessary.
Yeah, and I think kind of a term in our industry is return on hassle. Maybe not the most technical term in the world, but is it worth it to be checking all these different bank statements? I had a client in just the other day that had 3 different checking accounts. And he's like, well, that one pays these bills, and I can't remember why we set this one up, and it just as you age, I think simplicity is a really big asset for you. I know you mentioned liquidity a couple times, and I think it's interesting when we're working, right, our employer pays our salary. And I don't know if you guys ever tried going to your employer and saying, hey, just give me some more this month, or I don't need as much this month.
Yeah.
But probably be a weird conversation. That's just not how it works. But, once you're retired, basically you're paying yourself, right? You save these funds, and so you have some flexibility. And so something that came along, what was this, a year and a half ago, is this new T+1 settlement dates. I think it used to be T+2. And so all of a sudden, we can get stuff traded and get cash to people quicker out of investment accounts. And so maybe you can just touch on that as well, is how people can view even their investments as, yes, they can fluctuate, but as far as access to them, it's really as quick as ever to get to their investments.
Yeah, and so I'm sure all of our listeners out there, they're like, oh, T+1, they're about to talk about that, is probably the most exciting. I would say most of our clients, this is probably like, if you're tuning into this podcast, this is a big thing because I just feel like there's some misunderstanding out there with clients. The world changes fast, and I have a lot of clients that keep a lot of cash in the bank because they need that money in case they have an emergency. We have industry jargon, T+3, T+2, T+1. I would bet most people listening to this, unless you work in our industry, that's not really something that you track with. But at a simple level, T+3, when I first started working, at least 10 years ago, I don't even know what was before that, but there was a T+3, and then it changed to T+2, then T+1. And what that means is that it's getting quicker and quicker and quicker to get money from your investment custodian like a Schwab or a Fidelity into your bank account. And so the T stands for trade date, and the number after the plus sign, like T+1, means the federal regulatory bodies require one additional day for funds to settle before that cash can go to your bank. And so it used to be, back when I started in 2013, if somebody needed cash from their custodial account or their brokerage account, they would have to call in on like a Monday. Let's say it's Monday morning. And if we put in that trade right away, that would be the trade date. And then we'd have to wait 3 more additional days before the money could leave. So if Monday was the trade date, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, the money would be allowed to leave Charles Schwab, and it could leave and go to the client's bank. And so if the bank didn't process it until late, it might not be until Friday that that money shows up. And so 12 years ago, T+3 meant if you called on like a Thursday, the weekend, it got to be a long time where you'd almost have to say like it could be a week before those funds get to your bank account. And so the world is changing. That's the reminder. Things are getting quicker. And while there probably was a good reason decades ago to have a T+3, they're improving that. And so now it's T+1, meaning you can keep money in like a brokerage account in a like really conservative investment. Like you could use a money market fund. It's they were hovering at like 5% last year. I think they're down to probably like 3.7, 3.8 right now, which is probably more than most of you all are getting in your checking account. Minimal amount of risk in a money market fund. And you could, let's say you had $100,000 in a money market short-term duration bond fund in a brokerage account, and let's say you needed $25,000, you could call me on Monday morning. I could put in that trade, and the money would be on its way to you the following business day. And so that means we've gone from like a week sometimes to you call me today, that money can be on its way to you tomorrow. And I almost every time I tell a client this, they go, "Oh, wow, well that's like not too long a time." No. And they said almost anything could wait 2 days before I pay.
Well, it's interesting too, in kind of this cashless society we're moving to. We'll have people come work on our house, and I'll say, "Hey, do I need to cut you a check?" And they're like, "Oh no, we'll send you an invoice on email and just pay it." You know, and so it seems almost like things aren't as instantaneous. You know, maybe the grocery store still and some things like that, but if you had an HVAC unit go out or something, they're not going to have you pay in cash or write a check that day.
And that's really what I'm seeing with the clients that we help. Is like, even the week was manageable, but when you say, you know, it'd be on its way to your bank tomorrow, they say, "So wait, I've got all this cash sitting in my bank and it's earning 0.1% interest, 0.2% interest, or I could be earning 3, 4, 4.5% interest, and I can get it by tomorrow." Basically where we end up is we end up transitioning to the subject of, well, that's kind of like obvious that that's a better thing for most people, but it transitions to, so what's the point of my savings account? Like, why do I have a checking account, a savings account, and a brokerage account? And again, checking accounts, savings accounts are great because of the FDIC insurance level, $250,000 per person. I'm not trying to talk down the benefits of that. I'm just challenging people that are listening to this podcast. Life is full of these things where you have to balance the tension of simplicity versus complexity and maximizing your ROI. So like you mentioned it briefly. I grew up this way. I was an engineer in college, and you're always trying to get the most out of what you're given. When it comes to investments, you're trying to have a high ROI, return on investment. I want, if I'm averaging 9, wouldn't it be nice to have 10? What can I do to get me to a 10% average return? What can I do to get me to 11? We're wired, I think most people, to maximize ROI, but at the cost of what? And I think that's where this ROH idea comes in, the return on hassle. So maybe you don't need 3 checking accounts. Maybe you don't need 2 savings accounts. Maybe you don't need, I've seen some 10 savings accounts for different things. What if you kept enough in your checking account to help you sleep at night? Some people that might be $20,000. Some people it might be $100,000. Some people it might be $500,000. Maybe you're running a business and you've got rental properties and you need to be able to pay for stuff. Everybody's different on what that checking account number is or savings account number is. But I think maybe you saw this yesterday in your appointment. I've seen it too many times to count. I've got $450,000 in the bank, and it's accumulating because I'm not spending my Social Security checks and my pensions, and I just like having that cash there. Again, I'm not going to fight that if that's the number that a client needs. In fact, I would encourage it if it helps you sleep better. We have done that. But I think there's a case, just like your appointment yesterday, where maybe that $450,000 could be $250,000 or $150,000 or $50,000, and the difference could be invested in something very conservative like a money market fund, and you're going to come out ahead on that.
Yeah, and I think that was good to touch on the end is we can't forget asset allocation, and so you don't want to say, oh, well, I'll take my cash in the bank and I'll go build up a cash reserve over here, and I'm going to go pick 5 of the highest performing, highest growth stocks, and it's like, well, that's not apples to apples, so let's not go crazy over here and get our kind of asset allocation out of whack. But we could look at a money market fund. I know we have some kind of fixed income portfolios that are doing really well, especially with the dropping interest rates, and so there's definitely more juice to be had out of the squeeze at a very similar risk level. And so thinking through that, I think is important for clients, listeners, to say, hey, I do want to go get a little more juice out of the squeeze. But I also don't want to go crazy over here and take this pocket of money that's kind of a fallback for me and have it heavily invested in some really high upside equities that could also drop out tomorrow.
Well, I agree. And at risk of extending this conversation longer, I think this would be a really good example for, this is kind of targeted towards high net worth retirees. And usually there's a lot of cash at play for people that have a lot of money saved. And so I want to give you this kind of scenario and just consider it. Let's say you have a lot of cash. Maybe you run a business. Maybe you have money at a few different bank accounts in order to take advantage of the FDIC insurance protection, and that's a good thing for you. Especially for high net worth retirees who may be in a high tax bracket. I had this conversation about 4 or 5 months ago with somebody, and it was this situation: multiple banks, big business at play, and I was pitching them on this idea of, and they felt like that was too much cash. But do you know how interest is taxed? Mm-hmm. And so if you have a CD, if you have just interest that you're earning on a bank, maybe your bank has given you a good interest rate. Be careful with those. They sometimes change very quick and maybe faster than you expect. But interest is taxed at your ordinary income. And so for a high net worth person, let's say they're in the 32, 35, 37% tax bracket. If you earned $50,000 in interest, you would have to pay 35% federal income tax on that interest. So a third of that $50,000 that you earned is taxable at your ordinary income rate. And so I like to have this conversation. I did last year. But what if your risk capacity was actually a little bit higher and you could afford to invest some of that cash? In this case, it was like over $700,000. What if you could afford to invest some of that, and instead of getting taxed at your ordinary income tax rate, what if you invested it maybe not in the most speculative stocks, but big stocks that had a lower standard deviation, a lower relative risk to the market, dividend paying stocks. What if you invested that for a year and you had the ability to not touch it for a year? You would, instead of getting taxed at ordinary income rates, 32, 35%, instead you could get taxed at 15 or 20% instead. And so I think there's also a tax planning discussion here with cash is how much you need, what helps you sleep better at night, how much risk could you actually take with some of that, and would it make sense to peel off some of your cash, invest it, and prioritize long-term capital gains instead of a really high marginal rate? The lower your income, maybe the less important that is. But all kinds of discussions when it comes to cash. There's a lot of different things I think you can do, but I would argue with most people having the conversation about how you can simplify things. If something happens to you, would your spouse know how things are set up? Are you spending a lot of time tracking individual paper bonds in your bank account or your bank safe? Trending towards simplicity, I think, resonates with a lot of retirees.
Yeah. And it's so funny because I think a lot of people naturally hear cash and think, oh, that's the simple one, don't have to think about that one. But again, tax planning is these little incremental decisions, proactive decisions we make over a lifetime that we look back and say, man, I won the game. I crushed it. So, well, anyway, I appreciate you guys joining in with us today. We love to add value. I think I mentioned that last videos. Our goal is to add value anytime we sit down in front of the camera and turn it on. So appreciate y'all for joining in with us today. Make sure you check us out. We're on YouTube. Like and subscribe there. Spotify, Apple Music. Follow and check us out. Share us with some friends. If you find yourself at a lunch and you say, hey, I heard this riveting podcast the other day on cash, the cash dilemma, you've got to listen to it. Share it with your friends, family, and have them join the conversation.
There you go.
So appreciate y'all joining us. I'm Adam. This is Garrett.
Yeah.
And this is Retirement Tax Matters.
All right. Thanks so much for listening to Retirement Tax Matters. As always, the ideas we share here are for educational purposes, and we do our best to get it right, but this isn't a substitute for specific tax or financial advice because a truly effective strategy is always built around your personal situation. For more resources and to see our full disclosure, visit us at retirementtaxmatters.com.